Well, good morning and thank you for coming to this on very short notice. Today, El Paso Children's Hospital has filed for protection under the U.S. bankruptcy law. The decision to restructure financially is aimed at the goal of maintaining what has already been achieved, an independent, freestanding children's hospital that does not fall under the direction and financial control of a county hospital that serves adults under acute care. In March, El Paso Children's Hospital entered into mediation with UMC in order to reach an agreement for a change of control that would align mutual interests and resolve the Children's Hospital debt and operational structure. Both parties left that mediation with agreed-to terms and a deadline of April 30th to complete a final agreement and transaction. The April 30th deadline passed, and UMC failed to agree to a definitive agreement consistent with the mediated terms. El Paso Children's Hospital repeatedly told UMC that the new and final deadline, because of many financial and operational reasons, had to be May 15th. Since that mediation, UMC unilaterally changed the terms and on May 13th submitted a completely different term sheet to Children's Hospital. Unfortunately, the manner in which UMC has navigated the mediation process has been unproductive and not in the best interests of the Children's Hospital. It is our obligation to the residents of El Paso County to protect the independent operation of El Paso Children's Hospital, and more importantly, our mission, which is to care for the critically ill children in the region. We plan to restructure our debt, our financial dealings, insurance, partnerships, and other components, which will allow us to start fresh from a solid foundation. It is anticipated that the Children's Hospital can emerge from this process by the end of the year. This will not be an easy process, but in order to protect the Children's Hospital, its scope of services, and its patients, and to maintain all that has been achieved in 3.5 years, this is the right thing to do. Do we have the, or that, is that chart over here? We have a chart and a timeline which will help explain how we arrived at this point since May 24th of earlier this year. And it will, the individual components will be on the screen for you. We're going to start here, which happens to be February 24th. That was the date which we were given a memorandum letter from UMC that they would stop critical services to us within 30 days by May 24th. It was that letter that told us that they would stop processing payroll for us, they would stop providing dietary services, we would have to find alternative sources to feed our children 3 meals a day. We have no dietary function here, we have no cafeteria, it was not part of the building design when it was built. Housekeeping services would be changed. It would be difficult for us to turn and clean the OR rooms on a timely basis because of the special nature of the cleaning of those rooms without the hospital housekeeping services. And there were other financial services. Payroll in particular was, it was an immediate concern for us. So beginning on February 24th, we received that letter and we immediately began to urge UMC to enter into mediation again. There had been a failed mediation in January, to which they agreed. So on March 9th, we did enter into mediation. We came with guaranteed, with an agreed document that was subsequently approved by UMC's board and by the county commissioners. The mediated terms have been published. I believe it was within a week of the mediation having been completed. The original terms and charges of the arrangements between UMC and EPCH, El Paso Children's Hospital, The charges and the debt were onerous, above cost, and inconsistent with the feasibility study that was issued by the consulting firm and on which the revenue bonds were based, and the voters approved the revenue bonds. UMC has not played the role of partner or steward, but instead inflated charges to build up a large receivable on its own balance sheet. They've had every opportunity to make this work, and now we'd like to explain why the agreement has not been reached. So beginning on March 9th, successful mediation. When you come out of mediation, it's a two-step process. Step number one, agree to a definitive agreement, which is a formal document of the mediated terms. In most cases, that definitive agreement is reached within a very short period of time. 1 to 2 weeks is typical. It's unusual to take 2 months. Once the definitive agreement is in place, it sets the stage. The expected closing date was April 30th, and then due diligence would begin, where we open up all of our information and records to the interested party, UMC. What happened in this case is the first turn of the definitive agreement document was received by us with new terms added that were not part of the mediated terms. They were not part, and they were new terms and conditions, which we had not agreed to in mediation. The attorneys for both companies worked back and forth several times. By April 6th, we were told we're at an impasse and the language they're presenting is non-negotiable. That was April 6th. On April 20th, UMC advised, updated Commissioner's Court that they would not meet the April 30th deadline. We were informed the very next day, Tuesday, I believe, and if I have my dates right, that would have been April 21st. On April 23rd, our board chair and myself, Rosemary Castillo and myself, went to visit with Judge Escobar and David Stout to advise them, bring them up to date on where we were in the due diligence process, and remind them that if the April 30th date would not be met, that we had to have a May 15th closing. April 30th came and went. We did not have a deal, as you were well aware. We continued to work towards a resolution because we're so close. On May 7th, members of UMC's board, the minority membership of the board, and 5 members of our board met together without our attorneys present to discuss the situation. At that time, the Children's Hospital handed a signed definitive agreement to UMC for their approval, consistent with the mediated terms. That document was returned with changes, additions, on May 13th. Our board evaluated those changes and said May 7th is the hard and fast terms that we will accept. They're consistent with the mediated terms approved by your board, approved by the Commissioner's Court, and approved by our board, and that we had to have the definitive agreement signed no later than May 15th, which was last Friday. The last document turned to us yesterday afternoon essentially ignored the 2 key points that we said were absolute minimums, had to be available for us, and therefore left us no choice but to seek protection in the bankruptcy courts to restructure our financial obligations. This is the most sustainable option for the Children's Hospital to serve the region, and the one the taxpayers voted for. This is not the easy way out. But in order to protect the Children's Hospital, its scope of services, and maintain all of the things that have been achieved in a short 3.5 years. When the Joint Commission was here just 60 days ago, the surveyors made the comments at the exit interview, this is the best survey we have ever seen. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've never heard a surveyor make such a comment. The evidence of cooperation and teamwork between the physicians and the nursing staff and the clinical support folks was obvious and critical in the care that we render here every single day. To come from that survey with very few minor findings was an achievement that any hospital in this country strives for and few achieve. This children's hospital has achieved it. To receive the recognition as a COG facility for oncology to pediatrics. There are very few children's hospitals that have that designation. El Paso Children's Hospital has it. Respiratory accreditation. There are fewer than 1 in 10 hospitals in the country with such a certification. El Paso Children's Hospital has that certification. For these achievements to occur in 3.5 years from startup to now is very, very remarkable. This is what we're fighting to retain. This is what we're fighting to maintain. This county asked for it. The dream is a reality. We now have to push the reset button and just align our financial responsibilities. We will operate as an independent, freestanding hospital, and the restructuring puts us in a position to do great things. This is a non-patient care event. Let me say that again. This is a non-patient care event. Every child coming to our emergency room will be treated today and tomorrow, next week and next month, as they have been for the past 3.5 years. Every child admitted will be treated exactly as they have been for the past 3.5 years. The medical staff is on board 100%. There will be no change in personnel other than the normal changes that happen. You're all here in El Paso with the military presence. People get moved all of the time, but it will not affect patient care. Our key vendors, blood products, pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, things necessary for these critically ill children will not be interrupted. This is a non-patient care event. This is a restructuring of our financial obligations. UMC and its board will have no supervisory, no advisory, or operational control of Children's Hospital. They will serve as our landlord and continue to provide certain common services because we are in their building. Let me stop there and take some questions.
Yeah, just again, for the taxpayers that voted to build this hospital, why is this the best option?
My understanding of the bond obligation is that taxpayers agreed to fund the debt service required to build the structure. That building is here, and Children's Hospital will continue to be in that building for the foreseeable future.
Darren?
You mentioned, Mr. Rivers, 2 conditions that El Paso Children's Hospital wanted UMC, wanted from UMC, and they didn't get. What were they? What were those 2 conditions?
To some degree, it's no longer relevant because we were not successful in reaching any deal within a reasonable period of time. And our mission now is to go forward and take care of the children.
Can you elaborate on those 2 conditions? I mean, that's what obviously caused you to go this direction at this point. I think the public has a right to know what those 2 conditions are that were not there.
And again, I would say it's really not relevant because we have taken this decisive action to protect the children and we're going forward.
Last week, the county judge said that there was a 90% of the negotiations completed. So what can you say? You now are saying that there is no negotiations with UMC. What's going on between Children's Hospital and the county and UMC? Why are they saying one thing and you're saying another thing?
Well, when the April 30th deadline passed from the mediated terms, there was essentially no agreement. That was a firm deadline we both mediated towards that was made public. Part of those mediated terms is after April 30th, either party could step away if necessary or if they chose to. We chose not to because we were so close and continued to operate in good faith towards a decision by May 15th, knowing that UMC board met last night, we agreed to push the May 15th to May 18th, which has occurred. The conditions that we asked for had been ignored, and so we have no choice. It's clear that they're not willing to meet the mediated term sheet. Therefore, when you negotiate not in good faith, you have no reason to conclude that a deal will happen. So we took this action to protect the Children's Hospital and receive the protection of the bankruptcy court to allow us to restructure our financial obligations.
Can you talk more about the process that you are going to start now? And why are you sure that this is going to be a success? Why is this much better than taking UMC as a partner?
Our process going forward is to continue our daily operations and seek restructuring of our financial obligations. That's what the bankruptcy court is designed to do, is to allow a debtor to restructure. We believe that we can come out of this quite well and be the resource necessary for this community as an independent children's hospital. Why is that choice better? If you don't believe you can have a successful deal that will accomplish the same thing, then this is the only choice. This is not our preferred choice, but it's our only choice.
Is this a failure for the people who supported the hospital? How should they feel about this decision?
I can't tell anyone how to feel about this decision. This is a difficult choice. However, again, I'll reinforce, it will not affect patient care. The Children's Hospital will be here. The physicians will be here, the staff will be here, the critical care nurses, the operating room, the radiology techs, the respiratory therapy, all of the nurses, aides will be here. The services will continue as provided until we emerge from bankruptcy from all of our vendors, and we will pay all of our bills timely. So from that perspective, it's a better thing. It's restructuring our financial obligations, which are clearly need to be restructured.
And what's going to happen with UMC? Because the document doesn't show UMC as one of the top vendors in the document.
There is a technical reason for that. I won't go into all of the details. I'm not an attorney. We followed our bankruptcy counsel's advice as to how to file the document, and so it was filed that way. Clearly, they are a major creditor here, but for other reasons, they were not listed on that for technical reasons.
Is there going to be a lawsuit between both hospitals? Is that another legal matter you're going to have to address?
Well, bankruptcy is not something that gives you a right of action against. It's there for protection purposes.
Yeah, but I mean with UMC. That's why they were left out of the document?
No, they're clearly in the documents.
What was it about the old, or the financial structure that you guys had? Why was it a failure?
For those of you who may remember, the feasibility study had many assumptions, but the feasibility conclusions were the basis by which the hospital was promoted and the bond issue ultimately passed. Some of those assumptions never came to fruition. The financial cash impact between what the feasibility study forecast and what has actually been achieved through September 14 is about $90 million shortfall. It's coincidental that it is approximately the same amount owed to UMC. But the cost side, the service contract side, was developed on the basis of UMC's cost. Now this gets a little bit technical, but as you might imagine, many of you have heard the previous government contractors who charged $750 for a toilet seat. Not to be light, but the cost basis was on a fully allocated cost methodology, not an incremental cost methodology. And here's what I mean. If many of you are aware that the IRS allows a tax deduction for personal use of your automobile at 55.5 cents per mile presently. Okay, so you as an employer can reimburse your employees at 55.5 cents. or you as a business can deduct 55.5 cents per mile driven for personal use of your automobile. You all know that gasoline doesn't cost 55.5 cents per mile to operate your car. If your car gets 25 miles to the gallon, gas is roughly $2.50 now, maybe a little bit more. The cost to drive the gasoline cost to drive a mile is 10 cents, but you're allowed to deduct 55.5 cents. That's fully allocated. That takes into account normal repairs, maintenance, tires, insurance, the whole shooting match. So 55.5 cents is fully allocated, but the incremental cost is 10 cents. So we were being charged fully allocated costs, not the incremental cost. Now look at the two buildings. They're constructed at least 20 to 30 years apart in terms of timing. You're aware that Windows internal designs are more efficient today than they were 25 years ago. The Children's Hospital is more efficient, yet we were charged for building services, gas, electric, water, etc., on the basis of square feet occupied, not on the basis of actual utility costs. In the design, the utilities were not separately metered. I don't know why that wasn't the case. It just wasn't. Maybe it was an efficiency issue. But at any rate, to charge us on a fully allocated basis where we're in a more efficient building and probably consuming less energy than in a less efficient building, it seems to be an unusual way to allocate costs. Simple, but maybe not usual.
Sure. What about repaying the UMC debt? That does not appear as a debtor on the bankruptcy filing, correct?
No, they are a debtor in the bankruptcy filing, and it will all be restructured through the bankruptcy process. Not only their debt, but the debt to Texas Tech and the debt to every other creditor from whom we buy services.
Is that $90 million or whatever it is now is taxpayer money, correct?
It's what had been invoiced to Children's Hospital by UMC, but we do not believe it represents the value received for the amount invoiced, for the reasons I just described.
What about the continued services? Will they be paid off, or how will that work?
From today forward, we will continue to honor the invoices as presented going forward until we emerge from bankruptcy. That's true for all of our vendors. And certain key vendors are blood product suppliers, are pharmaceutical suppliers for drugs in shortage conditions, have been prepaid to ensure that we have those products available in time to deal with the patient care immediately, get through the first day, 30-day process of bankruptcy, and then continue on as an ongoing basis.
Judge Escobar just tweeted that the decision is a tragedy for the hospital, community, and the taxpayer. Can I get a reaction to that?
As I said earlier, it's not the decision we would have preferred to make, but by virtue of the breakdown of the discussions for a definitive agreement that should have been done in 60 days, 2 weeks, not being done in 60 days, it's untenable and uncertain, and we must protect the children. And we have no other choice. It's all about the children that are here, and your children and the children of your neighbors here in this community. Be available for them.
And Judge Escobar says that bankruptcy may force UMC and the taxpayers to continue to fund the services for free at Children's, but you're saying you're going to honor the invoices. How's that going to work?
The bankruptcy process, and I'm not an attorney, this is my understanding, so you can certainly go to other resources to test the accuracy of my statements. I'm telling you what I understand. Once you file for bankruptcy, you must honor both sides, the vendors and the debtor, must honor the agreements in full from that day forward until you emerge and it's restructured.
Do you worry this is going to hurt physician recruitment coming to a hospital that's in bankruptcy?
Well, it may or it may not. If the intent is clearly understood as a financial restart, not as a services, not as a, we're not cutting any services, we're not changing any services. The residents who have matched and matched at a higher level than ever before, they're still coming. They're coming to get trained in a specialty children's hospital, many of them because they're returning to El Paso. Having the Children's Hospital here is good for this local economy. Businesses are coming here in part because there's a specialty children's hospital available for them and their employees and their families. Will it hurt recruitment? I suspect it may have to some, but it may not to others. So I can't answer that definitively. It's a personal decision by the individuals.
How do those doctors feel about the situation? I mean, they're obviously very passionate about their work.
Dr. Furman, would you care to, Dr. Furman is our Chief Medical Officer, who's.
And what were they told, Mr. Rivers? When were
They were told just before this
Just
conference,
before this-
as was our leadership.
The physician team, and I believe all the other teams that work in the hospital, want to preserve what we have worked so hard to put together. This is a hospital that has 24/7 in-house staffing by attending physicians on at least 4 services all the time, 24/7. In the pediatric ICU, newborn ICU, on the general pediatric service, and in the pediatric emergency department. We cannot give that up. That has not existed in El Paso before. This is a hospital which now belongs to the Children's Oncology Group. What that means is that they have access to the same protocols. The children of El Paso have access to the same protocols that they use in other large cancer centers, St. Jude's, Sloan Kettering. They don't have to travel to get on experimental protocols. We have a hospitalist service that are specialists in hospital care, an neonatal service that is unparalleled, that it incidentally has a camera system so that a soldier on duty in Iraq can use his laptop or some other device to see his child in real time, 24/7, in the newborn ICU. We have a fully staffed pediatric emergency department. We have a lot of things that are needed in El Paso and have been needed in El Paso. And the medical staff don't want to lose those things.
And I'll reinforce that since the Children's Hospital's been open, the number of children that have had to travel to Dallas, to San Antonio, to Houston, to Albuquerque, to Phoenix to receive their care has been reduced by 80%. If the children need a transplant, they're going. If the children have a serious cardiac issue, they are still going out of town because we don't yet have that program developed. But an 80% reduction, think of the impact to the families. Their life is still disrupted by staying here with their child day in and day out, but they're not out of town. They're not in a hotel room. They have family to support them, family to watch their other children, to watch their pets, to manage their household, and to help them locally as opposed to going out of town. And any of you that have had a sick child, you know how important that is.
Mr. Rivers, what happens to the lien that UMC has placed on Children's Hospital?
Well, that will be determined in the bankruptcy process.
Can you elaborate on that any?
I don't know how they will view it. I know how we are going to argue it should be viewed, but I don't know how the bankruptcy process will ultimately handle that lien. But that's a key factor in our timing of this decision, as we had informed them it would be.
There's no other questions.